All right, guys, we are now live on YouTube. This is our monthly Alabama Work Comp Today, November edition. I want to welcome everybody. I want to say hey to Dave. How you doing, bud?
Hello, hey everybody.
All right, and we've got our guest and buddy of ours, Jack Edwards from the Edwards Law Firm in Wyoming. How are you doing out west, Jack, today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And Jack, I know you know this, but what we try to do each month on YouTube Live is we try to bring stories for about an hour of local, national, international, sometimes news about what's going on in the world that is surrounding employers, employees, and independent contractors. And we've been doing this for about 14, 15 months now. Every episode's a little bit different. We have friends of ours, colleagues who do what we do from different parts of the country. And Dave, I think Jack is now, he may represent the 8th or 9th state we've dealt with or people friends from. Does that sound about right?
Sounds about right, yeah. I think we've had a couple of people from Georgia on, but Jack, you're our first from Wyoming.
Welcome.
You bet.
Well, Jack, before we jump into all that we normally do on the show, tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice and what goes on in Etna, Wyoming.
You bet. Well, I didn't originally grow up in Wyoming. I grew up in Las Vegas and moved to Wyoming because University of Wyoming accepted me. So I was glad to come there. And my journey took me to Etna, Wyoming, which is on the far left-hand border of Wyoming. And I've been here for 15 years now. The sign outside town says there's 164 people here. And, apparently I had the audacity to think that I could stay busy. We have 3 lawyers here in our firm. We have a statewide workers' compensation practice and burgeoning personal injury practice, along with, local work that needs to be done for people. We don't try to be all things to everybody, but the reality of it is we get asked to do a lot and we try to do what we can.
I was going to say, with a town of 164, from a county standpoint, how many folks are in the county, if you know?
We're in Lincoln County, and there's about 15,000 residents total. This is a very big county. There's only 23 counties in Wyoming. And as you can see, it's a really large state. So our county's bigger than a number of states like Rhode Island, Delaware, and such. We're a destination in terms of retirement. We're 50 miles, at least my town's 50 miles south of Jackson Hole, which is the richest county in the country, arguably. I think there's a place in Connecticut that might rival it. But so the billionaires have pushed the millionaires out. That's what we like to say. Wow. Into Star Valley, which is more specific reference to where I live. So, the wintertime can get cold. And, the population might go down to 10,000, 9,000.
Well, I have never been to Jackson Hole or your part of the state, but I know that it's beautiful out there. From a work comp standpoint, Jack, what types of cases do you typically see in Wyoming? What kind of industries or what type of employers are we talking about?
Well, Wyoming, unfortunately, has taken first place over again to have the highest work-related mortality rate. We've traded back and forth with North Dakota. Although there's not a lot of oil and gas production here in this precise area, Wyoming is an energy-rich state. Mm-hmm. And oil and gas, coal mining, trona mining, drives this economy, which allows us to have no state income tax and very low property taxes. Of course, the energy sector has turned, and We've seen obviously loss of employment and of hopefully less injuries, but there's a lot of, the number one cause is transportation, but Jackson Hole is construction all the time. So we have people falling off roofs, things of that nature. Out in the oil and gas field, sky's the limit. Limbs ripped off, people killed, inhalation injuries. We have a client who had a cap off of what's called a vacuum truck that sucks water out, like wastewaters from this fracking. Do a lot of fracking here. Sucks all the wastewater out because there's a ton of water and all kinds of really horrible fluids that come out. And then they suck them up and they take them somewhere else and squirt it out. Cap came off, no safety chain. They managed not to kill him, but.
Dave, those injuries don't sound like typical injuries we have in our state, but they sound very serious nonetheless.
No doubt. Yeah, being national champs, Jack, for deaths at work is not a good title. You don't want that. It's horrible.
Well, for those of you guys who haven't met Jack or know of his practice, Jack also belongs to a similar organization that David and I belong to, and I'm going to let Dave tell a little bit about WILG and what it does and how it's allowed for practitioners around the country, such as Jack, for us to become friends with and to collaborate with from time to time.
Yeah, so we're members of the Workers Injury Law and Advocacy Group, and it's a nationwide organization of work comp lawyers, and that's where Jack and I crossed paths a couple of years ago in Las Vegas at our annual convention, and Jack was one of our speakers and did a great job, and kind of kept up since then. So it's a really good organization. It's a kind of like a big old law firm of work comp lawyers from across the country, and we've gotten to meet really good lawyers like Jack and know lots of lawyers in many different states. So it's been a real benefit to us, and gotten to meet a lot of great lawyers and made friendships as well. So,
Jack, have you had a similar experience that David has along those lines with WILG?
Yeah, absolutely, and been able to diversify the offerings that we can give to the clients that come here, because as we all know, workers' compensation is not simple on jurisdictional levels. Contacts, runs the gamut, and extrajudicial or territorial coverage. We're a monopolistic state program run by the state. And so I've been able to work with other WILG members and know that I have the premier attorneys, not just some passing workers' comp, person who's just kind of putting their feet in the water, toes in the water, if it were. And it's really, it's good for my clients. I want my clients to get the best service and representation they can get, even if it's not with me.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And guys, as we've done each month, like I said, over the last 14, 15 months, we try to bring timely topics of conversation, what's in the news. And of course, at least since March, certainly since April, the pandemic and COVID-related work comp and employment matters have really dominated what we've talked about on the show. And I think at a little bit of an act of defiance last month with Cheney Law out of Atlanta, we strayed from that. There wasn't that much new to report, but we've got 4 articles that we're going to talk about today. A couple of them one of them is extremely disturbing, but a couple of them do talk about employment-related matters and COVID and the pandemic. But the first one we're going to talk about involves Target, that large box chain that's around the country. I'm sure they're in other countries But the title of the article is that Target settles with OSHA and will correct exit access and storage hazards. Now, that may not sound like a real interesting title, but given how many stores there are around the country and how many neighborhoods around the country and how often they're used, there's something here that really caught the Department of Labor and OSHA's attention. Jack, reading through this, where there's some things of, I guess I should ask this first. Are there Target stores in Wyoming? I don't want to just assume that there are.
Yes, there are two.
Okay. And what did you take away? What would the general public from this article, what would be of interest to them from a safety standpoint?
People maybe think OSHA is a bad word, but the purpose of OSHA is to identify hazards that aren't readily apparent to the regular person. Mm-hmm. And that's the sole reason why that industry, or I'm sorry, that regulatory body exists, to put people on some kind of notice about the dangers of whether it's blocking fire doors, or, for instance, there was a case recently where a young girl was lighting a stove inside it, those trailers and the food buses everybody's doing these days. Well, they don't, these people barely know anything about gas appliances, let alone food business. And they had an 18-year-old girl working at the fair after this vehicle had been moved around, and they charged her with lighting the furnace or the fryer and all those other things. And I think you can see what's coming. Mm-hmm. And it exploded in her face. And, I asked my friends, how many of you allow your kids to light the barbecue? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So to put a 17, 18-year-old girl in charge of lighting this complex gas appliance after it's been moved, and who knows what kind of leaks could have occurred. There's an OSHA regulation for that, and that's why it exists.
Yeah, it's a lot of times clients have become, I guess, a little bit more learned, either through their employer or on their own, just Googling things. And they frequently will ask me, I don't know if you all have the same experience, is this something where I can call OSHA? Or they'll say, I've already contacted OSHA. And typically, and I don't know if it's still the policy, unless there is a death or 3 or more injuries in a specific event, I think OSHA just declines to get involved. I know historically that's the way they've been. Do you all have any more recent dealings with OSHA? Do you know if that's still the policy or if they changed things?
They have changed things, at least in Wyoming. Mm-hmm. I think we have our own separate OSHA office. And it's crazy how they divvy it up over the country. But there's a 24-hour reporting rule for death or hospitalization. Mm-hmm. That's the key here. And it doesn't have to take 3, it's just 1. But it's a toothless rule in terms of penalty to the employer, especially when no one finds out. I've actually had spouses or other people call OSHA, make the report.
Dave, what about from a third-party standpoint? OSHA's investigations, can they help not stabilize, but fortify a claim for a third-party action?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. And because OSHA can point out, can cite, can investigate where the employer or the third party, I said employer, but I meant third party, was in violation of some type of rule or regulation, which will benefit the injured worker in this if they have a third party case. It won't necessarily help that injured worker if they're having to pursue only a work comp case, because as we know, at least in Alabama, liability does not enhance the value of the work comp case. Now, OSHA could come in and correct things to make it safer for the next employee, though.
Well, anything else from this particular article, Dave, that you saw that the consumer should be aware of, or could maybe take a nugget of information that may help them from a safety security standpoint?
Well, we've talked about several times before that employers are responsible for providing their employees with safe and helpful workplaces. And if that's a good thing for the employee, then it's a good thing for the consumer as well. Work is dangerous. It should not be. Many jobs and workplaces are dangerous, but it should not be any more dangerous than it must be. These employees are entitled to a safe workplace. So it's good to see OSHA out in the field doing their job, making it safer for workers.
Okay, guys, I can't add anything further from what you guys have talked about, but anytime such a large company like this, which employs so many people and invites such a large, and our population relies on what it offers, that this is the kind of article that really should be discussed. And frankly, I hope that it now allows the public safety in there, and that Target makes those changes that really should be implemented. Let's see, we can move on, guys. We're going to talk about medical marijuana and whether or not work comp is going to cover it. This comes out of Massachusetts. There are several states that do allow for reimbursement of medical marijuana. Out west, New Mexico being one of the states. Let's see, I think that may be the western, Minnesota. And the rest of them are in the east. I was a little surprised at learning that. Connecticut, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, and New York. However, this article comes out of Massachusetts. Dave, why don't you take the lead on this one? Anything that you can certainly throw in your slant, what our state, how they feel about it.
Yeah.
So go ahead with a straight face, please.
Yeah, I'll try to give a quick synopsis of this one. So an injured worker wanted his employer, or through their employer's work comp carrier, to reimburse him for his costs related to his use of medical marijuana. And the injured worker spent over $24,000 in about an 18-month period on medical marijuana. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot
That's
of
a lot
pot.
of weed. Lot of weed. And this is in the state of Massachusetts, and medical marijuana is legal there. Bernard will have to, our guest next month is from Massachusetts, Judson Pierce. So we'll be sure to talk to Judson about this. So anyway, the High Court of Massachusetts said that they denied his request. They said, no, the employer work comp does not have to reimburse you for the cost of medical marijuana, because under federal law, marijuana is illegal, even though it's legal in the state of Massachusetts, and making the employer reimburse would basically subject them to potential criminal prosecution. And so the Supreme Court or the High Court of Massachusetts said, we're not going to make the employer reimburse. Interestingly, a few more facts about this. There are 6 states that allow for work comp to reimburse the injured worker for the cost of medical marijuana. And there are now 33 states that have that it's legal, that medical marijuana is legal in the U.S. 33 states.
Dave, does Alabama allow for either?
Oh, you didn't know the answer to that question?
No, tell the public.
No, medical marijuana is not legal in the state of Alabama.
That does not come as a big shock to those of us who live here. What about in Wyoming, Jack? How does your state treat either of those situations? Is medical marijuana allowed? And secondly, where do you guys sit on the reimbursement? Obviously, it doesn't say that y'all permit it, but is it even being considered?
It's not allowed. Wyoming's about as red of a state as Alabama. There's no statewide elected or federal person who's a Democrat. There's no medical marijuana, there's no recreational marijuana, but there's Colorado, and there's a lot of people in the Cheyenne, Casper, Southern Wyoming area that go to Colorado regularly. But so the workers' compensation system does not allow for reimbursement. I say, but I won't identify anyone, that I have clients who use it for help, and it's CRIPS clients especially. It helps, and I wish we could unravel things and start over with marijuana.
Yeah, I think all of our practices have clients who benefited from it at one point or another. And as much as I'd want to make this a discussion, which we could, frankly, about this for the whole hour, it is what it is. And at least there's those states that have recognized it from a reimbursement standpoint. Like we said, or David said, 33 of our states do recognize it, that medical marijuana is lawful and the benefits of it. And maybe one day, hopefully before we retire from our practices, our states will get on board to help our clients who so desperately need it.
Yeah, and what we haven't talked about is the fact that there's this anti-opioid movement, as the plaintiff's lawyer says. There's an anti-opioid movement, and Massachusetts is taking away that alternative, the alternative being medical marijuana. And there's this big push to get clients and get people off opioids. Well, what's the alternative? That's why so many states are making medical marijuana legal. And the defense lawyer in the case, the lawyer for the employer, says that Congress could fix that in a snap of a finger. So we'll see.
Well, it is what it is, fellas, and sadly we're not going to be able to fix those issues today. So we can move on to our next article, and this one is these last two articles that we'll talk about today are going to talk about the COVID pandemic issues, and this one particular one is what to know if your employer wants you to get vaccinated for COVID. We've heard Dr. Fauci and many others talk in the last several weeks of several companies now that are in trials, and lots of positive news headed in that direction. I'm very optimistic. Hopefully in the upcoming months, a vaccine will be put in place. And it is the concern for all of America, I would assume, in the world, to get back to some sense of normalcy, which would also include the labor, getting back to work. Jack, we've done a hybrid versions of working from home, telecommuting, and the like. I know from our past talks, I want to say your office has been pretty regular in working, but you guys space out nicely. But so much of our population has had to work from home. And maybe that's becoming the norm, but I know there's lots and lots of folks who would much rather be in their brick and mortar locations. And Dave, part of this article what I took from this is people are equating it to like having to get a flu shot before you can work in the workplace. What do you feel? What did you take away from this?
Well, first off, I hope that everyone can get vaccinated real soon. That'd be great. So the question is, can my employer require or mandate that I get the flu shot? And the short answer is yes. The employer can require that. Now there are exceptions to that, and I think that basically the article tells us that it's probably a good idea for employers to recommend it, to strongly encourage it, but ultimately not require it. With those exceptions being certain people in the healthcare field, their employers can definitely require it, just like a flu shot.
Jack, anything further? You have any thoughts on that one way or the other?
I think it's kind of like an election and the peaceful transfer of power. You know, you'd recommend it strongly and hope that you don't have to go push the guy out of the White House by force. You know, no one wants to get to that point. You would hope that, people could be reasonable and take all the factors into account.
Jack, there's a reason why we brought you on here for a reason this month, and you just hit the nail on the head, my friend. So thank you for bringing that up and bringing a smile to our faces. Oh my gosh, guys, we could derail this conversation very quickly, but I'm gonna keep us on track. We're gonna stay on track, and we're gonna move to the last article. And frankly, this article on so many levels is so disturbing, and it's disgusting, frankly. And the title of the article, this comes out of Iowa, lawsuit, Tyson managers bet money on how many workers would contract COVID-19. And it just gets worse. That headline, frankly, was the best thing about the whole article, because there's so many allegations here. So many people have died in April working at this Tyson plant. I think a third of the population of the workers contracted it. Numerous people actually died from it. And it's posted, guys, if you want to click on the link about reading some of these allegations, some of these people are going to jail. There is no doubt in my mind that people are going to end up going to jail. And it just sickens me the way that people utilized their workers in this manner. And these people had zero power to deal with it. And Jack, here's my question to you. When you have management, I don't care if it's this setting or some other, when you've got management, you have a large production workforce who are hourly workers. They're not salary workers. My experience, and I know David's is, and I want to see if yours hits this way, these people desperately need these jobs. They are the breadwinners for their family, and if they're not at work, they don't get paid. So the balance of power is so great at the top, and so little at the bottom. But then share a little bit of some of what management in this did that really just makes this article and this situation so bad.
The folks that work at these plants, we all know, are the more vulnerable in society. A lot of times they don't speak English as a primary language. A lot of times they don't have any education or licensure to have them doing other jobs. They're very labor intensive, and they're going to get hurt to begin with. We know this. And I'm going to go back to the election, because they all pounded jobs. And people are willing to elect anybody, apparently, to get jobs. And if they're willing to do that, they're willing to go through extremely horrible hazards to keep their job, because they know if they report, if they blow the whistle, raise the flag, they'll be going home. And Tyson Foods is, the employment law and the teeth of employment law is gone. And these people don't know to call OSHA and become an OSHA whistleblower. And the courts haven't protected these folks at all. So it's slavery, guys. It's slavery. They are choosing to make their small hourly wage and be exposed to dangers that have, risk of serious bodily injury or death. I mean, let's face it, it's legal terms. And these managers they're like IME doctors.
Yeah.
And the people that work there, these line production workers, I think they're probably not even paycheck to paycheck. They're probably, borrowing money. They're not getting paid a living wage. And management knew this. They preyed on them by offering them $500 thank you bonuses to employees who turned up at every shift for 3 months. I mean, come on, they're incentivizing them to go to work sick. And you're right, Bernard. The headline was gross. Betting money on how many workers could contract COVID-19. I didn't think the article get worse, but it got worse fast with the things that they knew and permitted and encouraged. And I hope that the families that lost their loved ones are able to get justice out of this case. I'm worried that they're going to that the defense of the Work Comp Act is going to limit them. I hope that I wish them well with their case.
Yeah, there's nothing good going to come out of this. Well, the only thing I hope that's good is that it cleans all of this up. It's not going to help those who are lost, but anyway, it's a very sad reality of what has happened in our pandemic world, at least with one large employer. And guys, that's the articles that we've put together for this week. And I want to, with our last segment of our show for today, what we like to do, Jack, is to compare a little bit about our home state's work comp laws and related employment laws with the home state of our guest, being in Wyoming. And so I want to start, and I'm going to let Dave take the lead on this. And we're going to talk about the first of them is we're going to talk about the statute of limitations, about bringing various types of work comp or work comp related claims. So Dave, why don't you, there's a few different nuances here. So just try to hit the highlights instead of we could get way deep in the woods, but this is, we don't want to lose our viewers. So go ahead.
So if you get hurt at work in Alabama, you have 2 years from the date of your accident to file your case in court or to settle your claim. And you also have 2 years from the date of your last compensation paid. So your 2-year window can be extended if you're paid compensation by work comp. The only thing I'll add to that is that medical payments, in other words, if you go and get medical treatment, that's not compensation, and that does not extend that 2-year window. I get that question pretty frequently, that my employer paid for medical care 2.5, 3 years after the accident. Can I still file my case in court? You can file your case in court, but it's probably going to get dismissed pretty quick because it's past the 2-year window. Jack, how about you in Wyoming? What are y'all's statute limitations on work comp?
The general rule is that you have to report the injury within 72 hours to your supervisor, or file an injury report with the Workers' Compensation Division within 10 days. Of course, there's full nature and extent arguments and injuries that develop over time. Let's say, carpal tunnel can be one of those. Those become long roads to hoe. The other thing is that they still don't, they haven't articulated very well, but an application for benefits, which we still don't know what it is other than a bill, needs to be submitted to the division within 1 year of the date of injury. Assuming that you have made it into those two jurisdictional hurdles, made it over them, you have, after a person reaches maximum medical improvement and receives an impairment rating, then they have 2 months before the last payment and up to 6 months after the last permanent partial impairment rating to apply for permanent partial disability. Medical indemnity payments, by the way, continue for life regardless if there's a third-party settlement. And our third-party statute is maxed out at 1/3 of the gross settlement. and then takes into account costs paid by the third-party attorney. Permanent total disability, ironically, heaven forbid a legislator's listening, doesn't have a time limit on it.
Same in Alabama. Yeah, disability is for life. Permanent total disability is a lifetime benefit.
Well, let me put a nail in that coffin for a second. Statute only allows them 80 months of permanent total disability, and then they have to do a job search. It's the weirdest thing on the planet. They have to do a job search after 80 months if they're perm total, and then they have to re-up. And a lot of times they've lost touch with their attorneys, and sometimes they don't do it.
Yeah.
But there's a renewal process that could be lifelong.
Bernard, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Jack, you had mentioned the notice provision. So, Dave, I want you to talk about notice in Alabama.
Sure. The injured worker has 5 days from the day of the accident to give verbal notice to their supervisor. And they also have 90 days to give written notice. So it's either 5 days verbal or 90 days from the date of the accident to give written notice to their supervisor. That's the notice requirement in Alabama for a work comp claim. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Jack, any other provisions with notice that you didn't previously mention and for work comp?
No, those are the notice provisions that I went over. It's very similar, just a little bit different timeframes.
What about adjudication of a claim? In Alabama, we may be the only state in the country that still adjudicates our cases with our circuit judges, not juries, but just a bench trial in litigation in circuit court. That's where we, among other, we can also go through the ombudsman program, but if you're going to file a lawsuit, you're going to go through the court system, and we're going to have a trial in front of our sitting judge of that county, wherever you filed it. What about you guys, Jack? How do you adjudicate matters, work comp matters?
Our system's at the administrative level, where the division issues final determinations at each stage of the game. And usually it's compensability, sometimes reasonableness, necessity of bills, and impairment ratings, MMI and such. That's at the administrative level through the Office of Administrative Hearings, kind of administrative law judge. We have a weird wrinkle where we have what's called a medical commission, which is a panel of 3 doctors or a chiropractor or some folks like that, who adjudicate reasonableness and necessity, impairment ratings, TTD, and permanent total disability, which is weird. They don't do permanent partial disability, but they do the PTD.
Interesting. Dave, what kind of nuances, we're talking about trials, we're talking about adjudication of Alabama work comp cases. What historically, what have been the most common types of matters why we've had to file a lawsuit in Alabama, as opposed to we can't get it worked out with either the insurance adjuster or if defense counsel's on board? What are some of those conflicts that have led us to having to file such lawsuits?
Yeah, I would say 2 come to mind. One is if we have a denied claim, then we will file that case in court and we'll ask for a compensability hearing where we're just asking the judge to make a determination on whether the claim is compensable or whether it's should remain a denied claim. And the second, I guess, most common reason I file a case would be if we can't agree on a pre-litigation settlement. We can't agree on the amount or the terms, Jack, we'll file that case in court and have the judge determine the degree of disability. Those are my 2 most common. Bernard, do you have other reasons to file?
No, that's probably the biggest things. And you hit the area I wanted to really kind of hone in on is sometimes, Jack, we have a two-tiered litigation or trial situation where if we've been denied and we file for compensability, we got to win the compensability hearing to move on to the next phase, which could end up in either another trial, or you can always mediate or settle it along the way. But we have found that once we're successful on a compensability trial pretty early on in the litigation process, it just kind of smooths out most of the rest of the way for our case.
I've tried the same case twice, a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it will smooth the way and they'll understand that, they don't want to try it over because as you're aware, res judicata collateral estoppel issues don't apply in these workers' comp fields. It's a state monopolistic system, and they're special assistant attorney generals who are 95% of the time the ones who are defending the case. They have no incentive to settle a case. There are no gross settlements here. In fact, us claimants attorneys are hourly, and we have to submit a motion for fees at the end of the litigation. And there's no doubt in my mind that the Office of Administrative Hearings and medical commissions, let's put it this way, they've changed their review tactics since the governor has issued a mandate for budget reductions.
Wow. Gosh, guys, so many topics here that we really, on so many of these, we could have talked the whole hour on just one topic. But that's why we're work comp lawyers, work comp nerds, if you will. And that's why we do this show every week. It's our position is we're just trying to educate the public on so many confusing, conflicting, and difficult issues, because I'm sure David and Jack, you both would agree with me that when somebody gets hurt on the job, all of life's stresses ramp up because it's their health, it's their finance, it's what kind of money are they bringing in, it's the standard of the quality of life gets impacted, it's communication within the family dynamics. All of that just starts to build up to where that stress just goes through the roof. Our job, David's job, Jack's job is to de-stress by getting answers for folks. And that's why we do this show, just trying to provide a little public service for people who may be looking for some answers.
Jack, I'm pushing for this show, for the name of this show to be changed from Alabama Work Comp Today to Work Comp Nerds. What do you think?
Today.
Work Comp Nerds Today?
I'm down. I'm completely down for it because, it's a gospel that needs to be preached about a marginalized population of people who had no choice in becoming disabled.
Yeah. No one ever goes in looking to get injured on purpose. That's for sure.
No. And I mean, think about these Tyson food workers or these Target workers or the people out here in the oil fields at 10 below and 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
They just want a job, just like, the election debate has always been. People just want a job.
And guys, as we do each month, usually it's the last Thursday of the month with the holidays. We've got another one coming up, December. Is it 19th, Dave? Let's pull up the calendar real quick.
I was pulling up my calendar now.
17th. December 17th will be our next show. And we've got Judson Pierce out of Massachusetts will be joining us. Who knows what topics that we'll have on board for next show. But as we do, after each show, we house these on the Nomberg Law Firm YouTube channel. You can find them in the Alabama Work Comp Today playlist. We go back over a year. And for all of those of you who have watched, commented, or may watch us later on, thank you for your support, your comments, your questions. Jack, we want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, a safe rest of your fall, and we hope to see you in person sometime in the upcoming months.
You bet. Well, happy Thanksgiving to you too as well. And I told you before the show, I'll tell you again, you guys are making a difference for, not only attorneys who do this work, but for the injured workers themselves. And that's outstanding in my book, Workers' Comp Nerd.
There you go. I like that endorsement.
Thank you, Jack. And just having friends like you on our show and being friends in real life makes it all worth it as well. So, guys, we're going to be signing off for this month's Alabama Work Comp Today. Happy Thanksgiving. We will catch you guys in a few weeks in December for our next show.